Hi everyone, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Soumya, and I'm from the Economic Times ETHRWorld, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the much awaited discussion on culture milestones that sustain business growth. This intrinsic conversation has been curated by ETHRWorld and MARG Business. A little intro as we move forward in this conversation today. Business growth is about the organization accepting the way forward and internalizing it. Here is where the organization culture impacts on what happens next. Today's discussion is about what specific cultural milestones have the leaders seen or engineered to make the energy for the growth plans. I'm really elated to welcome the panelists for the discussion today. Amarpreet Kaur Ahuja, Country Head in HR India, AstraZeneca; Bhavya Mishra, Director and Head of HR India, Lenovo; Meenakshi Cornelius, CHRO, JLL India; Soumitra Das, Global Chief Human Resources Officer, Reddington; and Krish, Head Training and Consulting, Mark Business Transformation, joining us as the moderator.
Thank you, Soumya. Thank you so much for kicking this off. We're having this conversation on business growth in an environment where, for the organization, its ecosystem is technologically vastly more aware, geopolitically uncertain, socially very sensitive, and that's the environment in which organizations have chosen a path forward to grow. And that path is, most of the cases, disruptive. Why disruptive? Because it changes the way people work. It changes the way people exchange information. It changes the way people make decisions, right? So much of the 8-hour day of your employee is changed. It's different. They use different tools, they use different models, they use different places of work. In that environment, we are still holding true to that culture that we had, that we think we still have, and that the culture that we want to have. When we are executing these business growth plans, the weird thing is it's no longer the plan, execute, done storyline or plan, execute, and post-mortem storyline, right? It's more of plan and execute and change and modify and redo because it's a very dynamic environment where things are changing every moment. There are more opportunities coming, there are more challenges coming, and they're coming to all parts of our pyramid. Being technologically aware means different parts of our organizations are going to get feedback on whether this plan is working or not very quickly. Again, that's an environment in which usually culture snaps back because usually the organization says, okay, I get this, but this is what I'm supposed to do to my boss, or this is what I'm supposed to deliver. This is what should get measured in a performance appraisal conversation. This is what I should get as a 360 feedback. This is what I should get credit for. This is what is expected of me when I'm asked to escalate something. Those are some of the things that we are playing with. We are moving, we are changing as we introduce all kinds of technology, all kinds of ways of thinking into our organization. Hence, our conversation today is on culture milestones. Culture milestones could be anything, right? We have had organizations that have come back and said, we're dealing with DEI as a rollout, and as we deal with DEI, we stop hiring for attitude, we hire for culture. And we sidestep who we are hiring, and instead we just focus, are we having the right culture in the organization? And that's how the organization made the shift into DEI. And that became a culture milestone for the organization. The organization looked back on that and said, that's when we embrace the new us. We have had organizations where the leaders stood up and said, we are no longer hiring you for life. We understand that your journey with us might not be for the rest of your working career, and we're still going to go ahead with it. And that was a very bold statement to make, and that changed the way the organization ticked. We have had organizations that went back to managers and said, this is how you're going to digitally be empathetic to your organization. And we taught them that. And as they went through that process, they came back. The organization now was behaving very differently. So culture milestones are those significant events, interventions, whatever you'd like to call, that could change the way the organization is engaging with its future. Why us? Why should we have this conversation? Because HR is the compass for culture. We may not be the articulators of culture, we might do that with others, but we are the compass. Eventually, the organization is going to look at us and say, are we heading in that direction? Are we heading in the right direction? This 45 minutes we are going to spend together is going to be trying to figure out what could be those milestones with the clear understanding that we don't have the solutions. Dialogue is the art of thinking together, and this group of us, we may not have solutions to all the challenges that we are facing all the challenges to business growth, but we're just trying to figure out what could be some anchors, as Soumya called it, right? The anchoring elements that we can put in place today that will help to sustain business growth in a very, very dynamic environment. That's what we're talking about today. And I think it's only fair that we start with a discussion on where we are in our organizations. And this is a question that I'm addressing to all of you, and we can probably alphabetically answer it, right? Amarpreet, Bhavya, Meenakshi, and Soumitra. The question is, what are some culture-related challenges that you're facing right now in your organizations that either impede or slow down business growth? What's happening right now? Over to you.
So thank you, Krish. I think thank you for setting a very beautiful context and, actually speaking about some of the very, very important elements, from a culture perspective and where is it currently leading to in terms of business growth. Now, I represent AstraZeneca India. However, globally, AstraZeneca is an organization wherein science and innovation is a part of our DNA. If you know where I'm coming from, we're actually working on life-changing medicines to actually improve the lives of our patients, and that's the element of the DNA and the culture that we are trying to strive to be towards. When we say that, how do we achieve something like this? We need to, of course, empower our people to reach to their full potential in a very dynamic, in a very inclusive, in a high performing working culture and environment. Now, if you have to build a DNA like that, if you have to bring that embedded into the your day to day working mechanisms, there's so much of challenge, because it's not just a scientist who needs to be breathing and thinking about science, but every part of the organization needs to understand and embed that entire culture and embrace that culture. So, one of those very, very interesting aspects that we are dealing with today is to embed that science led culture within the entire ecosystem, so to speak. And when we say something like that, the very, very first aspect that comes to mind is creating a very, very clearly defined learning culture. And from that perspective, are we able to unlearn, upskill, enable learning, and the learning in the space of science, and not just necessarily, any learning, any element of learning, whether it's an agile mindset, whether it's an entrepreneurial mindset, but with a bottom line of having science in every element of our conversation. And that's what, because unless and until you're able to appreciate the science behind a molecule, you cannot speak about it with a a healthcare practitioner or with anybody to embrace the right elements in your entire conversation. So that's the number one piece, I would say, in terms of a challenge and an opportunity of sorts, in some or the other way. The second element which you touched upon was from a DEI perspective. While diversity again is easier to get onto your scorecard in terms of the numbers and in terms of the matrix, but driving the right element of inclusive leadership behaviors to embrace all elements of diversity is a second big one that I'd like to really call out and position out there. Third element is again a piece when we talk about it from the larger organization's core vision, ambition, purpose that the organization carries. The ability to sort of have that cascaded with the right level of leadership communication is again a very important element. And if the leadership misses the bus on that one, you really don't know how to engage the organization and connect them to the larger purpose. And especially when you have such a strong purpose of saving patients lives, it's so important that every individual in the organization is able to sort of embrace that purpose and take that ahead. So those are some of the pointers I'd like to just call out from the organization's context.
Thanks, Amar. It made perfect sense. It's probably a lovely segue to Bhavya, who's going to dip into a physics past, and he said molecules. Yes!
Yes, that's
Over to you.
right. But yeah, from physics to applied physics and technology. So let me talk about Lenovo and the context of Lenovo here. So Lenovo is the number one PC company across the world. And here is the business as well as the culture challenge, right? As our global CEO as well as India CEO says that we need to transcend the growth cycle. And literally from there, right, saying that we are on a mission to actually transform ourselves from becoming just a products organization to becoming a services and solutions organization. And that itself is a fundamental change, in the organization itself. And mind you, it's a change when the organization is already successful. And I think the element that we could talk a little about is to say that, how do you change when you're already doing well in what you're doing, and you're already the leader? So what's the reason and what's the business case? Where's the burning platform? And I think which is where this whole importance of looking into the future, and also looking at your ambition of what do you truly want to become as an organization, which is where, if we go back to our vision statement, is basically says smarter technology for all, right? And when we say that, I think Lenovo is uniquely positioned to become one of those technology organizations who for their customers, their partners, can be an end-to-end tech provider, right from pocket to cloud and services and solutions and everything else that you can think of in the domain of technology. Now what does that imply from an HR perspective, from a culture perspective? I think it basically means a shift right from organization structure to capabilities that you have to the ways of working, and how is it that you're going to do this. And I think which is where, the double underline on culture, ways of working, how are we behaving, what are we expected to do happens. Because while we may be extremely successful running independent business units as PCs, smart devices, infrastructure, mobiles, etc., all of that, how is it that we can internally build an organization that collaborates really well to be able to go and interface with an external customer and be that one end-to-end provider? And I think that is where the big business case lies, right? How do we make the whole experience better for the customer? Which is where then, if I pull back to culture and say what are some of the elements that are really critical, right? I think collaboration would be amongst the first. And while it's great to say from an intent perspective, yes, everybody would like to collaborate for business outcome, etc., but when it really comes to brass tacks and saying, okay, how do you do that in really successful independent business units who for years have run like that, right? How do you create a structure that itself enables collaboration, or processes that bring out, how you're going to do it? If you're in front of a customer, how will you have answers cross business groups? Which then leads us to saying capability, right? If I'm a person who's selling PCs, it's actually not very easy to talk solutions and services and talk end-to-end technology or be able to talk about a server. So how do we enable that through capability building, through the right structures? And then obviously in terms of ways of working, I mean, our leaders in a certain business group actually reviewing them also on how are they driving or collaborating across boundaries. And I think culture, while the other things, which is structure, which is capability build, seem like the harder and things where you can really track, okay, have we done this, have we rolled out a structure, have we rolled out certain training programs? But eventually, if you ask me, it comes down to, are people really behaving as we would like them to behave? Is it actually happening and translating on the ground? Which is where, the test really lies. And I think that's the journey that we are on. We have been on, in fact, for some years in the past, and will go on in the future. And I think we have been fairly successful in that, in terms of being able to drive, not just behaviorally, etc., but also in terms of hard revenue, in terms of being able to show a shift from just driving, devices, to actually being able to transition ourselves in this direction. Obviously, the journey is not complete. It's a long-term business transformation, but I think we're well on our way. So that's a little bit of context from a Lenovo standpoint, and handing back to you, Krish.
Thank you so much, Bhavya. Partly when you're finishing off, I was thinking back to conscious competence, right? How do you make the
Yes.
organizations have a conscious, visible competence over that new culture before it starts again getting embedded and can be taken for granted? But at least in the temporary spike should be there where it's
Yes.
visible. And the other point I think, which is probably relevant again to what Meenakshi and Soumitra are probably going to say, is that this is going to spill across the organization into the ecosystem, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just within the boundaries of the employee badge carriers. There are going to be a lot more contractually bound people in the game. And how do you bring them along? How do you make it one I don't want to say one journey, but it is eventually one journey, right? But allow them their different paths. How do you make that balance happen? And I think Meenakshi and Soumitra would both have thoughts on that. Meenakshi?
Thank you, Krish. I think absolutely. I was just listening to Bhavya and Amarpreet's inputs. I think it's been a journey always, and I think from my perspective and my organization, we see that coming differently in different ways. We as a global real estate services specializing in commercial property investment and different aspects of the real estate business, I think culture somewhere continues to be the core for us, and if we really step back and think about it, and I think COVID and some of the recent, I would say, changes happening in the economy, the world order is as well changing. There is a lot of focus on sustainability, etc. What we have stepped back and thought about is it is an evolving thing, right? While a culture or DNA of an organization is based on, like for us, it's teamwork, ethics, excellence, which is our the core values. But the culture, what we need to build in, obviously needs a little twist or a change. COVID has taught us a lot of things, right? The hybrid model coming in, the new employment deal, what we are talking about, it's no longer the culture probably what we would have continued in the past. It's also a little agile, and everything what you start looking at is differently. Uh, from our perspective, I think we focus, what we really focus as an organization is on sustainability, technology enabled insights, what we can bring into future of spaces, and that cannot happen without people, culture, and expertise. And culture becomes something totally the center for all of us. And I think as we go through the conversations, we can talk about it. I think from my perspective, if we have to really think about just what exactly it's all about, it's simply defined as what people do and how we do things in an organization. And the rise and fall of an organization is a lot dependent upon culture. We can There is something called as strategizing the growth for an organization of what we want to achieve. But if we don't have the right culture, that's where you stumble a lot on driving the key goals. What we talk about, technology, sustainability, bringing a different world to the new world. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Meenakshi. And I think embedded in what you said is also the challenge that as a professional services firm, very many of your employees are going to be most of the time at project sites and client sites. They're not even under one roof. So you need to have that core that is extremely strong in the process. Makes perfect sense. Soumitra, could you bring us home? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Krish. And I think a lot has been already said by Amarpreet, Bhavya, and Meenakshi. Um, I'll just I'll just take a few minutes to say a few words on the kind of culture-related challenges that typically are facing the business today. You know that we are an IT services and distribution company located out of APAC and Middle East and Europe. I think there are two, three things that I just like to highlight for a company our size and our space. Okay, the first thing that we are talking about is how do we make sure that we are contributing to reducing technology friction. Now, technology friction is the level of innovation that takes place, okay, and the level of adoption. Okay, we are looking at a larger purpose over here. How do we go to the farmers? How do we go to sustainable kind of people who are doing sustainable growth, etc., solar, etc. So we are looking at reducing technology friction by ensuring that all the guys at the tip of the spear, that is the guys who are at the field level, understand technology. all right, and are able to create technology solutions. And to that extent, we are doing a huge amount of capability building. Bhavya talked a lot about that in her short speech. But it's a difficult thing to do. Okay, that's the first part. The second part is about creating a holistic mission, vision, values, and culture, values and principles in the organization that actually aligns everybody to the larger goal of the organization. Okay, and if you are a globally dispersed organization, it is very important for you to do that. Okay, so we are looking at things which are globally consistent yet locally responsive. All right. The third thing that we are looking at is putting a maniacal focus on culture as an experience. Culture is not a word that we write or we kind of talk about. It's an experience. How do employees experience the culture of an organization? How do customers experience the culture of an organization? And to that effect, we are actually walking the talk. For example, in our organization, there is no attendance. That's the first thing that we say. Hey, we trust all of you. Whenever you're taking leave, just log it in. You don't have to come in every day. You don't have to. So work from home, we understood quickly that the hybrid environment is going to stay. And the last thing, as everybody said, is capability building. Amongst the capability building is, of course, that you design your the professional and personal capability building agenda, and we will support you in that. Okay, the learning has in our organization has come from the classroom to the learner, and today there are very meaningful conversations that employees are having with their managers and their senior managers, where we are designing very personalized learning programs. With technology, everything is democratized and everything is personalized. I mean, every day you are getting personalized stuff pumped into your devices. So that's what two three things we are doing. We are trying to reduce the gap, the cultural contextual gap between all the three regions. I think at the end of the day, we are saying is culture is all about you and me. It's not about brick and mortar. So let's talk about what are the things that create culture experiences, okay, and actually impact the growth and the sustainability of the organization. That's all, Chris.
Thank you so much, Soumitra. Makes perfect sense because eventually it's all going to be about the practices that you implement, right? How do you, and I think that also talks to what Bhavya was saying, that I need to see visible behaviors that demonstrate the new way of working, new thought process, new mindsets, right? It's probably also a good segue into which elements of the culture do you play with, right? And I think that's also one of the questions from the larger audience, which is saying, how do I help my organization get ready for it? So, Amarpreet and Bhavya, my question to you is, as you look at the canvas in front of you, of all the elements of culture that are visible to you about your organization, which parts do you classify as being healthy? Not all strong cultures are healthy, right? I could have a very strong culture that's driving me towards a silo, and the organization says, yes, silos are good because silos drive expertise, and you're saying, well, that expertise is not collaborative. Now what do I do? So, given the fact that not every element of your strong cultures is what you might pick as healthy, my question to you is, which parts of it are healthy? Which parts would you seek to work with? Would you seek to work with everything? And sometimes when you seek to work with the organization, you also need to take permission from the organization. How do you play that part of the story? Over to you.
Quite an interesting element, Krish, I think that you're bringing out here. And you're right in saying you can't really boil the ocean and, just sort of get into every aspect and every level of, pieces that you may want to turn around and, try to get into every element. I think for us as an organization, it's extremely important to somewhere, like I was earlier mentioning about the science and the innovation part. So when we talk about the larger health elements or those characteristics for to try and sort of get that out there into the forefront, it's extremely important for us to first and foremost as a channel have very open, transparent, and a clear communication channel. when we say that right from top down to the bottommost part of the pyramid, it's very, very important to actually have these channels clearly laid out in the element of the right frameworks and right level of frequencies. There's a need for us to enable that cascades, and make sure that the purpose is clearly trickling down. It is coming together. People go after that one mission or one ambition of the organization. So that's one such piece that we clearly go after. Number two is again, an element of having an entrepreneurial mindset, a mindset that enables people to fail fast, learn, move on, and move into a direction wherein you are able to take risks. You're being curious, and that is when you can innovate as an organization. That's the only way you can really experiment with the research that we all would be aware of. I think any molecule and the kind of life cycle it sort of takes is over a 15-year window. So it's almost about many a times half of a career span of a research scientist, for instance. And till the time you find out results of that, you're there or you're not there within the entire ecosystem. So what happens is, are we able to take those calculated risks, decisions, and have that entrepreneurial mindset is another very important part, which is a part of the fabric of the organization. Third part is when we speak about collaboration, and this was a point you were alluding to, that very clearly the ecosystem requires people to collaborate and not compete. I think for me and for the organization, what we are trying to drive towards is clearly designed structures for cross functional collaboration, and make sure that that is what gets us to our results, and not probably working in silos. So those are three very, very important aspects I'd like to bring on the table.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks, Amarpreet. Not easy, but makes sense.
It is.
Bhavya?
It's a journey, as always.
So I'll take it on from there, Krish. I think I would speak both personally as well as from an org perspective. I do believe very strongly that it's very important to firstly know your strengths and then leverage your strengths. And I do believe that whatever culture be of an organization, right, there is something in it that works to make organizations so successful, right? Whether it's at a global level or within the country, whatever it is. And I think it is incumbent on us as HR professionals to be able to, get the nuances of what really works in the culture. What is that? One is, how we've articulated it in terms of words or posters or whatever. But, what are some of those core elements that are really working and making things stick? And I think once we know and identify that, to be able to use that in a change process is very important, right? What is it that is making people take? What is core to the ways of working, and how can we leverage that during a transformation? And then if I zoom in into Lenovo and talk a little bit about that, right? Lenovo is a very, so it is obviously a technology company, which means fast paced, changing, blah, blah, all of that is assumed, right? But I think along with that, some of the elements that I can call out: extremely passionate, very, very performance driven, high energy organization. Normally, people would really like to achieve high drive for results. So how is it when we are driving a transformation, like say from being a product driven organization to being a services and solutions driven organization? How can I leverage that element, right? As I tell people to learn about different BUs, or learn about services and solutions, which mind you is not at all in their comfort zone, not at all easy. For years and years you've done something, now you have to do completely something different, which is not easy, and where you're not even the market leader. So nothing, not even one rupee of that sale is going to come easy to you, right? It's not easy. Nobody's going to trust you on that. You have to build confidence on that area. How do we do that? Is there a way to integrate success success in this new area also into their ways of working, into their incentive, into how they are being reviewed? And while I know what I'm saying is very may sound very operational, but I think some of these are very, very important to drive everyday behaviors in organizations, to say that while okay, philosophically all this is great, but what are you eventually going to pay me for? What are you going to recognize me for? And I think for all people who are highly driven, want to achieve their results, it's very, very important what are you measuring? And I think any culture change that you want to drive, you have to build it into your review mechanism as well as into your incentive mechanism. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So I think that's very important, to identify what's working and build it in as a very core element of your change process. The other element which I can talk about, I think as an organization, we've always been very respectful, trusting, flexible, as well as very inclusive. And again, when we start talking about collaborations, while we can create all the structures that we want, we can push people into learning capability, etc. But just from a mindset perspective, am I able to leverage that mindset of saying that at a very basic level, right? It is about a certain level of openness and respect that you need to show to the other business group, a certain level of inclusion to the ideas that they are bringing on the table, which may be very different from how you are doing business. Their customers may have very different set of questions, but how are you opening yourself up to a very different way of thinking from how you've been doing in the past? So I think that element of respect, inclusion, just a basic level of openness, again, becomes a very important element to be able to leverage as we transform ourselves. The last one, and the last one is again linked to a little bit to this whole achievement mindset, performance driven culture, is that again in any change or transformation process, it's very important to celebrate early wins, because a lot of what you will do in the new area you will not be successful in, right? Which means that every little success that you get, are you really celebrating it? Are you calling out the heroes for not the core business, but everything else that they've done differently? And I think that itself drives the process and the organization forward a lot, to say that, if I'm really successful in being able to do this, am I going to be called out? Am I going to be recognized? And collectively, will everybody see me, as having been successful in this area? So I think, in a nutshell, just summarizing, I do believe very, very important to identify what your strengths are as a culture, and not to just think that you need to change everything, because I do believe that strong cultures have elements that work very well deeply, rather than saying that, we need something different. I think we have to go deeper into the elements that work and use parts or nuances of those as a part of the transformation process. So handing back to you, Krish.
Thank you, both of you. That made a heck of a lot of sense to me, and I hope it made sense to the questioner also who's asking about manufacturing organizations. What I'm taking away is, starting with what Amarpreet said, at the 300,000 feet level, make sure your communication in the organization is as clear and as friction-free as possible. Whichever model you pick, whichever industry you're in, look for communication as an area to improve. You don't have to fix the whole culture, but communication should be cast iron. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is risk-taking. Your comfort as an organization with risk-taking collectively, not just you in your silo, but risk-taking along with others, trying to get data on the table, trying to get thought processes on the table and making that work. And then the third part is making sure that as an ecosystem, you're bringing that story together, right? So that's from one point of view, like it's a 300,000 feet level. And Bhavya says, marry that with not disrupting what is working at the ways of work level. At the ways of work level, if people are already good at collaboration, build on that collaboration. If people are already good at exchanging information, then help them lower the guards a little more, and in that process, celebrate the successes. Call out what works, what doesn't work. Tie all of this down into their performance appraisals, tie it into their performance management, tie it into their work assignment, tie it into task assignment, tie it into their day-to-day interactions, right? So I think the bottom line over here, at least in my head, is we should not be chasing culture change as an objective in itself. The question comes down to, what goal of the organization is my current culture stopping me from achieving? The moment you ask that question, you will get leadership energy around that question, because now it's a goal. You're not changing culture because it's your pet hobby. Instead, it's saying, organization, you're struggling with this goal and our current culture is stopping us. How do we fix it? And then work backwards on that using what Amarpreet and Bhavya gave as a larger dashboard. Which also brings us to the second question, and this I'm going to pick Meenakshi's head and Saumitra's head on. The question as it asked was, what are the checkpoints that help you figure out are they coming along or not? But I'm going to flip that a little bit and ask Meenakshi and Saumitra, how do we know that the organization is not coming along? Because there are going to be a zillion metrics, zillion numbers, how many people came in, how many people are talking about it. Maybe adoption, counterintuitively, adoption is easier to measure because you're going to be looking for it. how will we tell it's not working? How will we help a business leader understand that your organization is not yet in the game? What are the signs that you look for that tells you that the growth is at risk because the culture is rejecting the thought process? Over to you, Meenakshi and Soumitra.
Shobhitra, you want to go first or you want me to go first? Okay.
Meenakshi, please go
I
first.
think, thank you. Krish, I think it's a very interesting aspect, and I think great insights coming in from Bhavya and Amarpreet and you as well. I think there are very strong indicators which show when the culture is not working, and I will step back and give a little view why culture doesn't work in line to the growth expectations or growth trajectory of an organization. Something what we call as culture gap. It was defined very well in one of the papers sometime back that it is the difference between what an organization's performance strategy expects the organization as a culture to work, but actually that's not what is happening on the ground. And also it is also a little dynamic on the changes and the ways what it happens. So that's what actually takes us to where the culture doesn't work, because the expectations what you have as an organization from a culture perspective is very different. So you put a strategy or these are the things we need to do, but actually doesn't happen. So it's more an strategy and execution gap which brings in the cultural gap and which leads to a lot of issues. Now some of the points what we always see in small pockets, right, is when there is not a strong purpose defined at an organization level or at a unit level. So the entire population or the group of people are not aligned onto what exactly we want to achieve. Now that defines or doesn't define people coming and following or fostering a common commitment, driving growth, culture, mission, values, vision, etc. So that's the overlay when this process or the culture challenges start coming in. And it is quite reflective in a lot of things. One, obviously the business metrics or the strategy doesn't meet what you want to, but a lot of other elements or signs what we have seen in a lot of organizations and a lot of studies which have also come in, when you start seeing your employees engagement and retention within the organization dropping in, because what's happening is there is no common vision, there is no common goal, there is always a difference between what a leader is trying one leader is trying to say to versus the other leader is trying to say, which creates a lot of ambiguity for the teams, and they don't see the larger picture. And that's where the engagement and attrition goes up. That is a very a strong sign what you see. And more often now what we have seen after COVID, and I while we are out of COVID, but I still want to say it because there has been a big change on even the organization people expectations. When we talk about goals and organization performance, it is just not about what they deliver to the organization, what they're getting back as compensation or reward and recognition. Now there is something called as employment deal, wherein one of the recent studies by one of the the top four consulting companies what we have, big fours, they spoke about especially the Gen Z working population. Actually when they talk about culture, they talk about goals for themselves, they just don't talk about organization, they talk about their personal goals which needs to go hand in hand and the well-being overall in the organization. All this, if it doesn't work, it leads to engagement low and retention low, which is reflective in a lot of surveys what organizations can do. Then the other thing which comes, which is a very stark indicator that the culture is not working for us, when the organization teams don't come together. So there's nothing called as one team or teamwork. Everybody tries to work in their own world because nobody is clear onto what is the common vision, mission, or probably nobody brings them together. That's the other strong indicator which comes in. Now, keeping this all in mind, there is also a strong indicator which comes in when innovative ideas, thought process of doing things differently, bringing in solutions, all that actually also gets stagnated, or it is not as great as an output what an organization would need. And that's those are, I would call out, are the strong three 2 to 3 indicators which actually talk about that the culture of the organization is not working. And clearly any organization can see that there would be a big resistance to change. So the agility piece, what we talk now, it completely goes down. uh, and thankfully in our
Thank you.
organization we have really been able to maneuver through it. We do a lot of change on how we want to drive goals, and drive the metrics which we want to do. And there is a big focus on bringing that purpose, bringing that common goal, and linking it back to the last person in the organization. That if we are talking about, okay, we will get net zero carbon by 2020 or 2040, how your role plays a difference. And that's what the culture is all about. The last
Thank
person in the team understands, Minakshi understands, or Krish understands what I do every day. How does that get into my larger purpose of the
That's
organization?
Thank you so much, Meenakshi. Sorry, I cut you off in the last sentence. I want to make sure Soumitra gets a chance to speak because we're running out of time. But I think what you said makes perfect sense. We need to those dots need to be connected, and I heard a lot of connections with what Amarpreet started off with, right? The communication and the purpose part, uh, right up to the last mile. Thanks for that, Soumitra. Closing thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Krish. I think all of you were very very valid points, and we all know that culture is like an iceberg. Okay, it's working, not working is only visible at the top, but the reasons it's working or not working is actually much below. Okay, and there are deep rooted causes for that. Okay, it manifests itself into three fundamental things. Say, stay, and strive. Say whether you are an advocate for the organization, you're a brand ambassador for the organization. Stay is that you continue to stay, okay, and not get diverted or deviated because there are some little goodies outside. And the most important thing is strive. How do you walk that extra mile for the organization? Okay, and these are three things which actually manifest, overall culture. I mean, you can talk about so many things, but these are fundamental to the approach that we HR guys should be taking. Okay, one of the things that I really want to mention over here is the use of analytics to understand culture. Okay, and this is something that lots of us ignore. Okay, how can we use analytics data to draw out inferences in terms of what's happening in deep pockets across the organization? And it's about culture is about a large umbrella and a black umbrella and a lot of red umbrellas below. Okay, when we talk about how we create small cultural ecosystems in our sales team, for example, in our finance team, in our HR team, right? And this has to be unique, differentiated, and leveraged. I think that's what I would just talk about. Other than that, the manifestations of these cultural misfits is attrition, low productivity, low performance, quiet quitting, whatever you have it. But I think the important role here to create that cultural statement is also about leadership. How we are walking the talk. Okay, how we are showcasing the values, principles, alignment, mission, vision. I think it's very important that the last guy, okay, at the tip of the spear or at the field, is aligned to those principles, values, and it's an acid test, okay, which we do most of the time when we are visiting plants, when we are visiting sales office, is to ask them, hey, what are we doing? What are we all about? What is our cultural experience? What should customers experience when they interact with us? I think those are culture statements that we need to showcase, okay, to the rest of the organization and align ourselves to that. Thank you, Krish.
Thank you so much, Soumitra. Makes perfect sense. And if you notice, everyone, he said data is king. Give me data. which is perfectly fair. And the additional complication we have is how do we extract data without getting, which is stepping on the toes of privacy, which is a different issue altogether. I think what we are hearing is we can no longer wait for the employee engagement surveys, the other surveys, the annual surveys that we take to get the sense of the climate of the system. We have to look deeper and further as heads of human resources. We are at the cusp of moving to human and non-human resources. So we're going to be dealing with a lot more personalities in our organizations. In that context, when we are looking at culture, we're going to be looking at data, right? We're going to be looking at not just data, but how does that data tie into that last mile behavior? That last mile behavior is going to change only if we have tops down the organization saying, yes, we need this in a consistent way, well communicated, directed all the way through, nicely linked to everything that the person does day after day. In a way, we are changing the fabric of the whole organization. I know we're running out of time, but I think the elephant in the room is, are we doing this? Is this an HR driven change or is this an organizational change? Are business leaders going to look at us and say, oh, they are doing it? Let me give the mic to my HR colleagues. They are the right people. And all your HR BPs look at you and say, why are you doing this to us? Or is this an organizational led change? That's one elephant in the room. The other elephant in the room is managers. How do managers deal with it, right? In my experience, when culture change comes in, for me, the warning signs are people refusing to get able at it? Willing and able? Are people refusing to get able? That's a warning sign for me that something is making them uncomfortable about learning this new skill. Alternatively, have they got able at it and still not doing it? Again, that's a warning signal that something is stopping them from getting that done, right? So we're going to be looking at all these things to make sure it lands. One request, one closing comment from you guys. I know there are other questions on the chat window, but I'm curious about this. Do you guys have a secret sauce to bringing leaders along? What's your one secret sauce? One thing that you do to make sure the right leader with the right level of credibility and influence and authority is backing what you're describing as your agenda? Each of you, just one secret sauce that you have. You can go in any order.
I can start. I don't think, Chris, frankly, there's a choice. I think that the choice is between failure and not standing by it. And again, I'm just going back to saying that is the change, we are not changing for the sake of it, right? Or the transformation is not for the sake of any one particular team or person or whatever, right? I do believe that whatever change or transformation any of us are speaking about or do want to plan for is critical to the organization, right? So the cost of it is the cost of failure, right, in terms of it not happening. And I think time and again it is proven that unless leaders themselves walk the talk, it's not going to happen. And I think, if that is not happening and leaders are not standing by you, I think maybe sometimes it is good to take a step back. Let a month pass and see what happens if leaders don't do, and go back to them and show them, how much of it will happen if they don't stand by it. So I do believe that there's no other way. I don't think that there is a way to do it under their nose without them kind of being actively supporting it. It's not about, passive intent that yes, 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 I'm behind you and all that. I think they have to be in the forefront and be espousing for it literally. And if that doesn't happen, then it's not going to happen. Nothing in culture can happen mid downwards. It's only going to happen if it starts at the top. So that's from me.
Fair.
I think we have to take that client, partner approach, where we are actually helping business diagnose what is going wrong there. Okay, giving solutions from a culture perspective and empowering them to drive those solutions, where they realize, therefore, that they have to take charge and they are responsible for driving culture across the organization, right? Most of the time it starts with a very simple thing, and all of us have experience. Oh, attrition is not our game. Attrition is HR, right? But attrition is a phenomena of how things are getting managed in the business unit. And I think there is where we step in and say, please, this is this, we are going to help you do that, but it's your responsibility and your accountability.
Thanks, Soumitra. Amarpreet, Meenakshi, you probably have about 10 seconds each.
Yeah,
Please, over to you.
I think the only one thing I would like to call out here is if, as an organization, we are able to embrace the culture itself of speaking our minds, speaking our thoughts without without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being perceived in any manner whatsoever, by itself will bring about sustained business growth.
Makes sense. Thanks, Amarpreet. Meenakshi,
My
no
one
pressure.
bit, Krish, I would say, and probably covered in some way. I think the only way to drive culture from the top is to make leaders part of the what you are trying to drive, or bring them in the decision making of what we want to drive as a culture, the purpose, vision, mission, and give them empowerment, how they want to lead it, and be driving it from the top. I think those are the two things, I would say, would be the magic words for any organization to be successful.
Makes sense, Meenakshi. My own favorite is exactly that. Show them some visible, tangible artifact that says this is your culture and this is where you need to be heading. Right. With that, Soumya, I'm very sorry for dragging this on, but it was an amazing conversation, and we had lots of fun at this. Back to you, Soumya.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Krish. And I think the audience definitely enjoyed. And yes, as we conclude this insightful conversation on cultural milestones that sustain business growth, I'm truly inspired by the profound insights shared by all of you. I feel today we really reaffirm that a strong and a purposeful organization culture is the bedrock for sustainable business growth. So, my heartfelt gratitude to all of you once again and to the audience for such an active engagement. Let's take these lessons to heart and build workplaces that embrace equity, diversity, foster creativity, and drive both business success and well being. So, on that note, thank you so much, everyone, and have a fantastic day ahead.
See you guys all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you
Bye.
for having us.
Thank you so much.